The following is a project of our nonprofit newsroom. Support Midcoast Morning and local community-centered journalism today by signing up to be a monthly sustaining donor at chly.ca/donate. It doesn't take much money to support local news.
Hello and welcome to Midcoast Morning. I'm Joe Pugh. The City of Nanaimo is set to start charging drivers to plug in at its electric vehicle chargers. This week, City Council adopted new bylaws set to come into effect June 1st that will see EV drivers pay 2.5 cents a minute for the first 2 hours of charging at city-owned stations. Fees will increase to 6 cents a minute after those 2 hours, as well as during overnight hours. Part of the rationale is that more people are using the chargers. ICBC data shows EV registrations in Nanaimo went from 165 in 2018 to more than 1,000 in 2022, the most recent year data is available for. There were also hundreds more vehicles registered in surrounding communities like Ladysmith, Nanoose Bay, and Parksville. Today on the show, we'll get the scoop on the new bylaws around charging and hear from an EV owner on how things have evolved over the years. We begin with Jennifer McCaskill, Manager of Facility Asset Management with the City of Nanaimo.
We were successful with a grant application about 2 years ago and have since installed 5 new electric vehicle chargers throughout the city. And over the last year, we have been watching various users and their patterns for usage and have noticed that some people are using them quite effectively, a couple of hours, top up as they're driving through town. Others, though, are staying much longer, charging overnight, sometimes up to 24 plus hours. And what we're looking to do is encourage people to get what they need, but then move along to make use of space for other folks and make sure that there's an opportunity for appropriate maintenance overnight, because we do have cars staying overnight charging. And really just allocate the costs associated with these chargers to the people who are making use of them.
Can you tell me a bit about how many EV chargers that we have in Nanaimo that are City of Nanaimo chargers, and maybe a bit of info about where they are?
Sure, yeah, we've got 6 public-facing electric vehicle chargers. One of them, and they're all dual head. One of them is at Merle Logan Fields. One of them is outside of the Beban Pool main entrance. Bowen Complex down by the tennis courts, Oliver Woods Community Center right next to the playground area, and Masseo Sutton Park, and at the upper parking lot of the City Hall for those people using services at City Hall or at the Service and Resource Center. And
so all of those chargers are just open to be, if there's space there, folks from the public are free and encouraged to go use them?
Absolutely, yeah. They're connected to the ChargePoint network application, and so people can see on their phones or using that app if they're available, and there's dual heads on each one of those chargers, and they're welcome to use them at any time.
And how do the rates that the city is going to be charging, how do those compare to if you were maybe using a privately owned charger?
And analysis that we did initially when developing the bylaw had the fee being somewhat commensurate with at-home charging. Since approval, there have been a few folks that have contacted the city noting that the power, it's significantly cheaper for their at-home charging. Each vehicle is going to have a different experience based on how old the vehicle is, the capacity of it, EV versus PHEV. So the intent was to have it fairly comparable, but that might not be the experience of some folks. The intent with these chargers is not to replace at-home charging. The preference would be for folks who have the opportunity and ability to install their own chargers at home to do so and then make use at their convenience. But obviously giving some sort of ability for folks to top up while they're visiting a facility or running errands at a local business. That's really the intent of these chargers.
And you kind of alluded to off the top the fact that one of the reasons for this bylaw is coming in is that you've seen that people are using these things now. Can you tell me a bit about maybe what we know about the state of electric vehicles and maybe their uptake or use in the community in 2024 here in Nanaimo?
I don't have any information from 2024, but a colleague has provided some information from 2020, starting in 2018, percentage of electric vehicles in Nanaimo, these are according to ICBC statistics, was about 0.3%. And by 2022, we've increased to 1.7% of passenger vehicles are made up of EVs. So it's growing. It's still a very small percentage of the overall passenger vehicle market.
And in terms of the City of Nanaimo's own vehicle fleet, I understand that we have some EVs there.
We sure do, yeah. We've got 16 light-duty electric vehicles, so those are made up of either passenger vehicles or light trucks. And then we've also got 3 electric ice resurfacers. And
is there an official city strategy or plan when it comes to electric vehicles?
We're actually working through an EV fleet strategy at the moment, just looking at what the implications would be for converting our fleet. Each time we have a fleet renewal come up, we do look at what's available, the services that vehicle is providing, and seeing if we can find an electric vehicle that will meet those needs. We do have emission reduction targets that Council set in 2019 that we're working towards. So any place that we can reduce emissions, we're definitely trying to do so. In some instances, it's not yet feasible to be replacing some of our fleet vehicles with electrics. A good example might be garbage trucks, fire engines. Some of these vehicles need to be ready to go, and they do have longer distances that they need to travel. And some of them are almost cost prohibitive at this point. We are keeping an eye on other municipalities as what they're doing and seeing how those sorts of adoptions go, and we'll adapt as we need.
So then what are maybe some of the situations where it would be feasible for the city to use an EV for something?
We've had great success using EVs for folks like the building inspections folks that are able to charge up overnight, and then the route that they have is within the range of an electric vehicle. We've got some light-duty pickup trucks that have the same sort of route needs, that are able to put the tools that they need in the back of the truck and then make their rounds as needed. It's about making sure that we're still providing appropriate services to the citizens of Nanaimo while we're reducing emissions.
And earlier today, we mentioned that there are 6 kind of city-owned chargers. Are there plans for any more?
At this point, no, not that I'm aware of. These chargers, the first one was installed a number of years ago, and these last 5 came online as part of a grant application with a large mid-island EV strategy. And it's the sort of infrastructure, unfortunately, that it's fairly expensive to install it the first time around, and then the renewal cycle that we need to consider. So we need to balance the needs of, or rather the increased service to a small group of the population while we consider the needs of the overall community.
And is there anything else you think the public maybe needs to know when it comes to EVs in Nanaimo in 2024?
I think it's a good thing for people to carefully consider where they're at and what their values are, and make sure that what they're looking at is appropriate for their needs as they look at their transportation. Ideally, from a Nanaimo standpoint, we're trying to provide a sustainable transportation system that moves ideally towards a modal shift of walking, cycling, or mass transit. But we do understand that we are a passenger vehicle-centric society. We're a long, narrow city, and sometimes that doesn't meet the needs. But encouraging people just to consider what their transportation needs are and seeing if there's a way we can reduce emissions and head towards zero carbon transportation.
Jennifer McCaskill is the manager of facility asset management with the City of Nanaimo.
Midcoast Morning is made possible by the Community Radio Fund of Canada's Radio Meters program and listeners like you. Support Midcoast Morning and CHLY's nonprofit newsroom today by becoming a sustaining donor at chly.ca/donate. Local news can't survive without your support. Another way to help us out is to share this show with your friends and tell them why they should support us. Finally, if you're listening to the podcast edition of Midcoast Morning, go and give us a positive review on Apple Podcasts or whatever podcast feed you use. It helps people find us.
We're taking a look at electric vehicles, or EVs, on today's program. I reached out to a few car dealerships here in town to check on the demand and availability. I heard from both the Kia and Hyundai dealerships that they have several EVs in stock following shortages in recent years. Jay McLeod, sales manager at Wheaton Hyundai, says that EVs have been back on the lot for the last few months.
I think the people that were passionate and wanted to get into the EV world, they've done that. And now it's a little bit of normalcy. I think, our demand is going to be lower going forward. I don't know if negative press has put a stop to it. I just think that this is just a natural progression.
McLeod says he's heard EV owners are waiting longer for a charge than before.
Well, one thing I'm hearing electric owners saying is that they see the need now more charging stations. They find themselves waiting longer now to charge their car because there are more cars out there, more electric cars out there.
To learn more about how the experience of driving an EV locally has evolved over the years, I got in touch with Larry Bolt, president of the Mid-Island Electric Vehicle Association. Can you tell me when did you start driving an electric vehicle?
Personally, I started in 2016. The first electric vehicle I had was a Ford C-Max Energy, which is what it's called a plug-in hybrid. It had a small bit of electric range, and then it switched over to gas automatically. So I'd get about 20, 25 kilometers of range. And I kept experiencing what they call range anxiety, and where I always wanted to be on electric. And then a couple of years later, 3 years later, in 2019, Hyundai launched the Kona, which had over 400 kilometers of range, and that was perfect for me. And so we traded in at that point. And this past year, we just traded in, after 4.5 years with the Kona, we traded in for a Hyundai Ioniq 5.
So how have you seen everything that has to do with driving an EV evolve between 2016 and today?
Oh, it's evolved tremendously. There's so many new vehicles coming out. Volkswagen started to go a little bit retro, and they're coming out with the ID Buzz. The first one in Canada apparently was in Vancouver, and we'll see more of those. And what it is the typical old Volkswagen van. Put your surfboard on top and away you go.
Can you tell me a bit about what it's like charging your car right now?
Well, I live in a condominium that is not keen on electric vehicle charging here in Nanaimo. They have they've got some misinformation about charging. And so unfortunately, they won't allow it. So I have to use public charging. And I have no issues whatsoever with it. For the longest time, it was free. There still are a couple of free, no fee charging stations, but most of them have a fee. And in the vast majority of cases, it's a very reasonable fee. It's still makes it worthwhile driving an electric vehicle.
So every time you charge your car, you're using one of the publicly available stations around town?
That's correct, yes. Can
you tell me how many of those there are, or what it's like, what the maybe cost range is in all of them?
Sure. There's different types of chargers. So I'll just cover that first. There's level 1, which is your standard plug at home that you plug in your toaster or whatever to. A lot of people call it a trickle charge. So it's a very slow charge. And then there's a level 2, which would be like a dryer plug, for your clothes dryer. So it's on a 40 amp breaker. And that's quite a bit faster. You usually get between 6 and 11 kilowatt hours. Depends on how the vehicle itself, what it'll accept. And then there's what's called a DC fast charge or level 3. And that's the big ones that right now, BC Hydro at Superstore in downtown in the Parkade by the Port Theatre, those ones are at 50 kilowatt hours, 50 kilowatts going into the vehicle. At Canadian Tire, there's Electrify Canada, and those they are 150 up to 350 kilowatts. So they're very fast charging. Not all vehicles could accept that. My old Hyundai Kona could only accept up to 77 kilowatts. My new Ioniq 5 can accept up to 240 kilowatts. So
can you give me some idea, some context of how quickly each of those types of chargers might charge your vehicle?
Sure. Level 1, it depends on how far you've driven that day. So with a level 1, could be all overnight. Whereas a level 2, it could be 2-3 hours. They generally give you about 35 kilometers of range per hour on average. And then the DC fast charge, again, depending on your vehicle, my vehicle, it could take up to about 15-20 minutes to go, say, from 30% to 80%.
So in maybe a month or a year, what does all this work out to in terms of how much you have to spend on fuel, shall we say, for your car?
Yeah. I'm going to say probably about $300, $400 a year. So, and that includes, I drive about 15,000 kilometers a year. So this past year, my wife and I went up to visit some family in Edmonton and had no trouble finding charging. And we were fortunate. There was a number of them were no fee. The hotels that we stayed in included charging and at no fee. So we spent a total of $35 on fuel for that trip.
Going to Edmonton?
And back.
Now, part of the reason we're having this conversation today is that the city has introduced new bylaws that are going to come into effect in June for some fees for charging on the city-owned chargers around town. What do you make of those? Well,
I make it that they're doing the right thing. Because what we find or have found with the ones that there's no fee, people plug in and walk away and then just leave it there. They'll leave it there for the day because it's not costing them anything. Whereas if they have to pay, then they vacate and it leaves it available for another person to come and charge. And those are a level 2 charger, which I mentioned earlier. And their fee that they're putting in works out to $1.50 an hour. So that's similar to other ones. So it's very competitive. And it helps the city to recoup those energy costs and the costs of the chargers and so on. One of the nice things that I saw that they're putting in is a penalty. So if I go to an electric vehicle charger with my electric vehicle and I don't bother to plug in because it's closer to the building I want to go into, and I'm just being lazy, and there's now a fine, a $35 fine. And they have early payment breaks and all that, and late payment extra charges. But then if someone with an internal combustion engine vehicle, which generally is referred to an ICE vehicle, internal combustion engine, if they park in that spot and block it basically from an electric vehicle, they now will be subject to a $35 fine. So that's a good thing because there are some people who are, for their own reasons, not comfortable or not happy about EVs, and they'll go and park their electric or their gas car there and block it from other electric vehicles.
So it's basically the same as a parking ticket for parking in an electric charger spot and not using the charger.
Or in a handicap zone. Same idea. Yeah, if you're parking in a handicap spot and don't have the display in your window, you could be fined for that. So it's a similar idea.
Are there any challenges you find you experience driving an electric car related to it?
Early on with my plug-in hybrid, yes, I mentioned my anxiety about wanting to be on electric as much as possible. But since I've moved to the others, no. I've went down with my Kona a couple of years ago, did a volunteer thing in Victoria where I drove down there, drove around the city for 4 days, and then came back, never charged there, and I still had about 20% of my battery charge left. So the range is quite good. And I mentioned going to Edmonton. We left here in Nanaimo with a full charge, got to Merritt, charged up to 80%. We stayed in Salmon Arm, charged overnight at the hotel. The next day, charged in Golden, and one stop there. And the timing of the stops is beautiful because, when I had a gas car, I had to stand there and hold the pump Then I had to go to pay or do whatever had to be done. With an electric car, I can plug it in, go into the store, get any coffee or tea or whatever, get back to my car, and the car's charged. So I find it similar in time to what I was spending with a gas car. And so it works out really well for me.
You mentioned being in Victoria. How do you find the charging situation is elsewhere on the island outside of Nanaimo?
Oh, very good. Victoria has a good number of charge stations throughout the city, some privately owned, some city owned, and throughout the island, it's growing. BC Hydro recently announced a whole bunch more, and they're spreading out into areas that you don't expect to see electric vehicle chargers. So, if you want to go to the West Coast or up to Port Hardy, Port McNeill, there's charging all along the way.
Have you found that anything changes in winter or especially cold weather for you?
Cold weather does affect an electric vehicle, but no, not much more than it affects a gas vehicle, because gas vehicle takes more fuel to run all of the systems that have to run to keep the engine warm and the cabin warm and so on. Whereas an electric car, we recently did a talk at the Harbourfront Library, where we, through Zoom, brought in two speakers from Prince George to share about winter driving. And they go all over the place with their electric vehicles. And yeah, the range does drop off, but as they said, it's negligible in comparison to what it used to be, because what has happened is over time, the vehicles have developed a better battery management system. A lot of them have heat pumps now that help to keep the battery warm at an optimum temperature, so that in the colder weather, it stays warm and is able to get the maximum out of it.
And do you find that the charging infrastructure available kind of keeps up with the number of people driving electric cars? Is it relatively easy to find an open space?
It's relatively easy. I always say this, that the first electric vehicles on the island were probably around 2012. And so you think that's 12 years ago. The infrastructure has come a long way in 12 years, quite rapidly. It's still probably not up to where it needs to be, but it has come a long way, and it is growing all the time. I mentioned about BC Hydro. We've got Petro-Canada has chargers, although they've had some difficulties with the chargers here in Nanaimo. And so they're quite often shut down. They have been for several months right now. But you see Chevron now is putting in charge stations. There's one on Terminal Avenue. My wife and I use those all the way up to Calgary. And they're on the run. And part of their thinking is it's a cash thing for them, because we're going to park our car there. We're going to go in their store and maybe buy a coffee or a sandwich or other things. And so they're looking at that opportunity as well. So they're looking at the fact that they're eventually going to not have as much gas sales. So they've got to find another revenue avenue. And so we see more and more of that. So it's growing, maybe not quite at the pace that the vehicles are, but it's really doing well.
If folks are interested in doing what you've just mentioned, in talking to electric vehicle owners, is there a space in Nanaimo that they can do that?
We don't have a brick and mortar space, but the second Tuesday and the fourth Tuesday in Parksville at Sirius Coffee, we meet for coffee at 10 a.m. And on the second and the fourth Saturdays, we meet at Country Club in the food court there. And we have a sign out there, and it says that curious about electric cars, ask an owner. And we put out some literature as well. And there's a bunch of us will sit there having coffee and tea and talk about electric cars. And we're happy to have new people come in. We had a budget this year for some advertising. We did in the local newspaper. And we had we booked the library once a month, and we have different topics. We had a topic just recently. It was about trying to dispel fears about electric vehicle fires. And so we had an interview with one of the local fire chiefs and spoke about that, and also about insurance, because home insurance and vehicle insurance, people sometimes think electric vehicles are going to be more insurance from ICBC, and it's going to be more costly for their home insurance. It's the opposite of that. It's not. It's pretty much the same. So we do those types of things as well. Our next one will be on March 24th, Sunday, March 24th at 1 p.m. at the Harbourfront Library. And we're going to be talking about camping with an EV.
Is there anything else you think it's important to bring to this conversation today?
Oh, people are curious. Come out and ask an owner. When I picked up my Ioniq 5, the salesman says, "You probably know more about this car than I do." And I said, "Yeah, I do, because I've done my research and I've been driving an electric car." But the owners, we'll take people out and take them for a drive in a car, if they come and they're really, really curious and want to know, and they have lots of questions, and we'll show them all the ins and outs. Or for people who just bought an electric car, we get a lot of those that join us and say, "Well, how do I do this with it? I can't figure this out. I read it in the manual, I can't figure it out." And then an owner will help them.
Larry Bolt, thank you so much for making some time to speak with me.
I appreciate you doing this today, Joe. Have a wonderful day.
Larry Bolt is president of the Mid-Island Electric Vehicle Association. That's our story for the day. Thank you for joining me. I'm Joe Pugh, host and producer of Midcoast Morning. Jesse Woodward is our executive producer, and RB Frew is our technical advisor. You can sign up for CHLY's newsletter at chly.ca/subscribe for updates from our nonprofit newsroom. Our theme song is First One by local Nanaimo band Waste Management. You can find more of their music on their Bandcamp. If you have a story you'd like us to cover, email us at news@chly.ca. That's all for now. I'll talk to you on another Midcoast Morning.
Midcoast Morning would not be possible without the funding of the Community Radio Fund of Canada's Radio Meters program and listeners like you. Midcoast Morning is a project of CHLY's nonprofit newsroom. Support nonprofit journalism in Nanaimo and on the Salish Sea today by becoming a monthly sustaining donor at $5 or more per month. Support the program at chly.ca/donate. If you're already a supporter, record a voice memo telling others where you're listening from and why they too should support our work. After you're done, you can email it to us. Also, share the podcast with your friends. While Meta is blocking Canadian users from sharing news content on their Facebook feeds, you can still share our podcast directly with your friends via Facebook or Instagram Messenger. Finally, this program acknowledges and gives thanks to the Snuneymuxw First Nation as we broadcast and podcast from their traditional territory. Thanks for listening.